faith, spiritual values, moral issues, government, economy, education, work, responsibility. What we think about these depends on our worldview. Now, VCY America presents Worldview Weekend Radio with Brannon Howse.
Welcome. Glad you guys are with us. We're going to be joined by Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel Rob Maness joins us because we have, Russian ships just a few miles off our coast that reportedly have nuclear weapons on board. Again, we are doing things, the globalists are doing things that seem to be inviting World War III, inviting tensions and potential catastrophe. And the colonel, of course, knows all about this as an expert in this arena. He worked in the nuclear part of the Pentagon, writing the manual for the nuclear football carried by the president. He was the commander of Kirkland Air Force Base. And we're very, very pleased to have him as a broadcast partner with us as we produce his daily 1-hour television show over at worldviewtube.com. worldviewtube.com that you can view and watch live or on demand. So we're really glad he's on our team because he helps us understand things that a lot of us as civilians, don't know. This is not my area of expertise, but it is his. And we're glad that we can call on it. And he joins us today. Colonel, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you, Colonel. All right, so what do you make of these reports, increasing reports that that we have the Russian ships, maybe even submarine, moving into Cuba with nuclear weapons on board? Is this a response to us, America, working with NATO, providing Western weapons and fighter jets to strike deep into Russia, as we'll get to in a minute?
Well, considering the context that President Biden and the other NATO countries just approved the use of our longer range high technology weapons that we give to Ukraine for them to be able to attack targets in Russian proper, under that context, yes, absolutely, we should be concerned about it. But on the other hand, the Cold War between us and the Soviet Union was over long ago. The Soviet forces at the end of that regime were in a shambles, especially the submarine forces and naval forces. They haven't been able to range the seas like the United States Navy has been able to for quite some time now. And this is not that unusual for Russian U.S. Navy combat vessels to come into Havana Harbor or visit ports of call in Venezuela or even Nicaragua and places where the Russians have been friendly for many, many decades. But the context is what's important, like I pointed out at the beginning of my comments, and that is why I see this as an answer to the escalatory step that the United States and NATO took by authorizing these weapons to be used on Russian soil.
Here is one source on X I follow, Mario Naufal. He says, U.S. is chasing nuclear Russian submarine near Florida. 2 U.S. Navy destroyers are following a group of Russian vessels that came within 66 miles of Florida on the way to Cuba last night. Analysts believe Russia is strategically sending a warning to the U.S. after NATO gave Ukraine the green light to carry out attacks on Russian soil last week. And the source is Newsweek. We have another one here, also by the same individual. Russian nuclear submarine surfaced 66 miles off Florida's coast last night. This is exceptionally rare. There haven't been subs this close to U.S. territories for a while, he claims. And then he goes on to talk about what he sees as similarities between this and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Is that a stretch to say we're getting into the historical scenario of a Cuban Missile Crisis? Are we there yet, or are we headed that direction? What do you think, Colonel?
No, I don't think we're headed. I don't think we're there yet. Are we headed in that direction? Absolutely, we're headed in that direction. But let me just correct something that Mario said there. Yes, it's been a while since Russian submarines have surfaced that close to the American coast in a long time. But I guarantee you it has not been very long at all that Russian subs were out monitoring our communications, fairly close to our coastline, but stay submerged, and it's very difficult to find and track those types of craft. That's why submarines are so important, both the ballistic missile nuclear submarines and the attack submarines, which is what we're referring to here, I believe.
So it's kind of like a real Hunt for Red October scenario.
Similar, yeah, similar. It's but the Cuban Missile Crisis is where we caught them building missile launch infrastructure on the island. That's one of the differences here, is that we're not seeing that, although we have seen and do know that the Chinese military have bases built on Cuba right now. We don't believe they have any missile launch capability, but there are Chinese military bases built in Cuba at this point, and we're aware of that. But as far as going into a Cuban Missile Crisis type scenario, we're not there yet, but we need to be paying attention, because the Russian president is definitely sending a message, an answer to our message that we sent to them by approving Ukraine to use our weapons on their territory. It's just a little bit further up that escalation ladder that you and I have talked about before, that we need to be very, very watchful of, so that we're aware if President Putin ever gets to the point where he thinks that the risk isn't so great to try to launch some type of attack, either directly or through proxies, like we're doing with the proxy Ukraine now on Russian territory. So we have to watch that very closely, because deterrence, we still have it in the Western Hemisphere, but this is an indicator that that is eroding. And we're not in a very good position, because we have a very weak commander-in-chief right now. His feckless approach and decision-making is just not the right person that we need leading the United States Armed Forces right now.
Overseas, this week, he apparently tried to sit down in a chair that wasn't there, if that's what you believe he was doing. And then the video circulating today on the White House lawn for a event saw him freezing. I mean, I saw the video. It was weird. Everybody is kind of bopping along to some music and song going on, and he just is frozen like a statue. I mean, tell me, as someone that helped to write the nuclear manual that goes with the nuclear football carried by a military officer near the president at all times, what does this mean for our national security?
Nothing good, Brannon. It means nothing good for our national security. Just imagine that, say, Russia decided to launch a missile strike, an all-out missile strike like in the old days, which they still have the capability to do. And the president of the United States needed to make a decision in very short order, and I'm talking about in less than 3 minutes, in order to be able to get our response off of the launch pad and off of the submarines out at sea before they were destroyed. That is why we are in a very dangerous situation, because our adversaries see this behavior and they know that he's not capable of doing it. And that gives them, even if they think it gives them a minute of extra time, it creates the perception in their minds that they might be able to get away with it without risking the total destruction of their own country. And that's not the way things need to be in nuclear deterrence. And unfortunately, we find ourselves, and this is similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis, in a situation where we are looking backward as far as nuclear deterrence goes, and massive forces standing astride their own countries and facing off against each other, except this time, the Chinese, who we have not been paying enough attention to and should be the number one priority, have doubled their intercontinental ballistic missile force quietly over the last few years, and there is nothing good that's going to come from that.
During the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, forgive me for not knowing because this is not my area of expertise, but did the Soviet Union at the time have the ability to launch nuclear weapons off submarines in 62?
They had long-range intercontinental ballistic missile capability than I believe. But
on
they
submarines?
didn't have, but they did not have the ability to launch these hypersonic cruise missiles that are nuclear capable off of ships, attack submarines. There's a difference between the ICBM, the Sea Launched Ballistic Missile long-range missile submarines, and the attack submarines. We've had the capability to launch nuclear cruise missiles off of our ships and attack submarines for quite some time. And we're having to do a return to that technology to reinstate it, is what the debate is going around right now in the United States, in order to have an answer to rebuild our deterrent effect against potential attacks like these, with these hypersonic cruise missiles that could be launched off of submarines and off of ships. And of course, everybody knows, the United States has admitted this, is that we don't currently have an adequate ability to detect and defend against those types of missiles.
So if Russia has, as it's reported, hypersonic missiles aboard these vessels coming into Cuba, if they have hypersonic missiles and we don't have the capability to knock them down coming in that close, what are, in your mind, what's the likelihood that Putin might finally decide he's going to take out Washington, D.C.? Do you see him as someone that would do that if we keep going after his early warning systems? Or do you see him saying, I'm gonna go ahead and do this, open this Pandora's box? Or do you see him working more closely with China and saying, I've tried, they keep pushing me, they clearly are wanting me to do something, and they instead decide to pull off some event inside the U.S. With the assets they have here, some kind of massive explosion, multi-terrorist attack? What do you, if you were to war game this, what would be your biggest concern right now?